InnerQuest explores various pathways through which you can connect with the infinite wisdom of the universe and apply it to personal, professional, and spiritual growth. This program, featuring accomplished practitioners, educators, and authors, is provided by Infinity Foundation, an innovative center for holistic studies and research. We invite you to share this journey with us.
Hello, welcome to InnerQuest. My name is Jay Stone, your host for today, and our guest is Angela Thomas. Welcome, Angela.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm looking forward to talk about the mindfulness, as John Kabat-Zinn was a speaker, led a workshop for Infinity. So let me just tell the audience a little bit about you. Angela has been a family nurse practitioner since 1998 and is holistically certified. She incorporates mind, body, and spirit for healing, especially for work teaching the transformative practice of mindfulness. First of all, there's some initials after your name, and I had to go search and find out what they were, but I think it's very interesting and informative and speaks a lot about you and the work you do. So explain what the initials after your name mean.
Yeah, that's interesting about in the field of nursing, a lot of us utilize our initials for whatever certification and training we have.
So you have like FNP, is it?
Yes, so that's Family Nurse Practitioner, meaning I'm a family nurse practitioner. I've been trained and educated in that regard. And
so
then,
that's above an RN? In additional training after you received your RN?
Yes. We're kind of called mid-level providers. I'm not sure if I like that term as much, but similar to like a physician's assistant.
Okay.
So all of us have a foundation as a bachelor degree in nursing. Mm-hmm. So the 4-year degree in nursing, and many of us have a lot of experience as nurses and then go on to become family nurse or become nurse practitioners or
and then
certified
there's
nurse midwives.
Another, I don't see it on the screen, but there's another, like something with a C. I know it's a -C. What's that?
So my focus, so I have been a nurse practitioner for almost 20 years. Prior to that, a good 6 years as a staff nurse, and most of my experience has been in the emergency department. Mm-hmm. But I've always had a holistic bend, so care of the mind, body, spirit. Always kind of been that way. The focus of the kind of care that I provide, even in the emergency department, kind of covertly utilizing mind, body, spirit, since that's what I believe we are all holistic beings, right? Mm-hmm. So to come back to that question of the initials, I'm certified as an advanced practice holistic nurse, which just means I carry a certain amount of education and experience to be certified as a holistic.
Well, I also know there's holistic physicians. There's a National Association for Holistic Physicians. And so how is a holistic nurse different from a typical nurse? Mm-hmm.
That's a good question. That's also the beauty of nursing, is that there's so many different aspects. But nursing in and of itself, the foundations of nursing incorporate mind, body, spirit, and they always have, back to like Florence Nightingale, right? Okay. So, and there is different, so there's holistic practice incorporating the mind, body, spirit, and then there's also integrative practice, like integrative physicians and integrative.
I've interviewed a few integrative physicians on the show. Fascinating work. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of work after you get your MD and out in the field.
Yes.
Practicing.
Yes, and now there's a board certification that they've developed as integrative, like certifications for.
Now, you also have a practice. You want to mention what you do in your personal practice?
Sure.
Or private practice?
Sure. Yes. So, as I said, most of my experience is in the emergency department, but I did my master's thesis on spirituality and nursing practice. So again, I've always had a holistic bend. And about, 8 years ago, I attended a conference at Harvard on mind-body medicine, and it was Herb Benson
I know about Herb Benson.
Right? Yeah, because he's the guy that brought the science behind why meditation
back
yoga, any of that work.
late 60s, early 70s.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
biofeedback.
Yes.
He went and back in the 70s. He went to he got a letter from the Dalai Lama, and he met Tibetan monks in India, and he hooked them up to all sorts of medical devices. And before that, it was believed our brain waves, our heart rate, our blood pressure were beyond our control.
Exactly,
Yeah.
Jay. Yeah.
He freed us.
Yes.
Well,
yes, and then
there's many practices that were freed up the practitioners before, but he enlightened Western medicine.
exactly,
and
and got the
Westerners.
science behind it, right?
Yeah.
So, and he's just as cute as he can be. He's like your uncle or something, right?
Yeah.
So I was at this conference, and he. So yes, exactly. He coined this. Whatever happens during meditation, yoga, biofeedback.
Are you going
any
to
of
say
those-
relaxation response?
Relaxation response.
How did
Yes.
I know that?
How did you know that?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So he found the science behind it. So
Actually, you'd have to go back before Benson, because Benson gives credit to Dr. Walter Hess.
oh right.
Yeah.
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 But Benson gave it a much better word or term, and then popularized it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And brought it to medicine as we know it, right?
Mainstream,
So, yes. So he took us through a 6-minute meditation based on our word in our belief system, like come Holy Spirit or shalom or love or peace or any of that,
Yeah.
right? And just like 6 minutes. And I opened my eyes and thought, this is what we need to bring to healthcare. And I realized the best way to do that was through the vessel of mindfulness meditation. So Herb Benson had worked with Jon Kabat-Zinn, who and John started those stress reduction clinics at Harvard and UMass, right?
Yeah, right. And for those, Jon Kabat-Zinn has been a college professor and researcher, I'm going to say almost as long as Benson, from the 70s.
Exactly. Yes. And he wrote really, which is what's become so to bring the practice, the healing practice of mindfulness meditation. Jon Kabat-Zinn wrote this book, Full Catastrophe Living. Right. So, and this was the fundamentals for what he started the stress reduction clinics at UMass. And then started a program called Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction, which has become the gold standard of mindfulness meditation. And it's secular, so we can bring it to all populations, and that's the beauty of it. And it's very well researched, so it's kind of reproducible.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the research? Because we can actually know through medical devices that a person is resting or in the relaxation responses. Dr. Herbert Benson calls it. You want to talk a little bit about the research?
Sure. And it's said that about 60 to 90% of visits to healthcare providers are directly related to stress in some way. So
if you talk to Dr. Hans Sally, he said it's all stress related. If it doesn't, it's not the cause, it's the effect.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and some of our chronic pain conditions and how we deal with pain and hypertension and all of those things. And now we have research to show that a lot of our autoimmune disorders can be related to stress in terms of the inflammatory response and that kind of thing. So yeah, there's so much. So there's another mindfulness researcher that you referred to earlier, Richie Davidson, that you said when Jon Kabat-Zinn was in the right?
University of
Yes,
Wisconsin.
Madison,
Professor.
and there's a big center for mindfulness up there, and I had the opportunity to hear him speak a few years ago, and he said mindfulness meditation will be like what we called like the exercise craze of the 70s, where everybody went out to go lace up their running shoes, and we thought, what are these people doing, right? Like this is never going to catch on. So really,
yoga is very popular. When I started with yoga in the 1980s, there was maybe 4 or 5 yoga studios in Chicago, and now there's, the area of my office, there's probably 5 yoga studios within 2 miles, you know.
Yeah. Yes.
But I think people are drawn to yoga because of the shavasana, the corpse pose, or the deep relaxation at the end.
Yeah, that
It's the
never quite
reward.
seems long enough. does it?
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah. So back to that research. That's the reason we're hearing so much more about mindfulness and the reason that mindfulness-based stress reduction programs can be researched, because
well,
it's
and people actually feel better, like you said. You just know it. You don't need to be hooked up to all sorts of medical devices to realize your blood pressure has dropped 10 points.
right. And
You
we're
know,
not-
or the muscle tension that was in the chest or the stomach is gone, or the headache and the backache is subsided or completely alleviated.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, the own body produces the feedback that the mind is paying attention to.
Right. And with continued practice, you start to realize that you're able to respond rather than to react in
And
stressful
so
situations.
you said something important, continued practice. How long do you recommend that a person sit and practice mindfulness each day?
There's certainly a dose response we're finding, the more the better, but also in our society, we just want a quick fix. So one of the most recent studies is there's this magic number of about 12 minutes of spending in a state of mindfulness meditation. But again, dose response, the more the better, probably.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this, in Dr. Benson's book, one of his books from like the 80s, he said 10 minutes twice a day or 20 minutes a day. Now, I started December 1982, and I haven't missed a day in 35 years. And, I would say most days it's been at least 20 minutes, and most days twice a day, and then others days just once a day. So 20 to 40 minutes. But you get back so much more energy. Before the show I was saying, I've had the pleasure of driving John Kabat-Zinn around and attending his workshop, and the one thing I took away from him was how energetic and vibrant he was. And he was probably 70 years old at the time. It was just amazing. And
Yeah,
So-
and that's wonderful that you have a practice like that, and it'd be really interesting to see. So we talked about research briefly, and so now we can do fMRI studies, not only paying attention to the vital signs and
It's a
those
functional
kind of things.
MRI?
Exactly, functional MRI.
Yeah.
So in addition to the initial research that Herb Benson did, paying attention to vital signs, and we know that we're less reactive physically in a physiological response, and now we can do these functional MRI studies to actually look at what happens to the brain under meditation. And then for long-time practitioners like yourself, it'd be interesting to see your functional MRI study to see that we can actually increase the thinking part of our brain, right?
Brain
Our,
activity.
Our gray matter. And
By giving it a rest, because
Right.
the brain waves slow down when we practice mindfulness or meditation, and we need our brains and our minds need rest, just like our bodies need rest.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
So in your practice, in our practice, we're actually not only changing the way we react to stress physically, but also changing our brains. There's a cool study that you may have heard too recently that shows that lengthened telomeres on the DNA of meditation practitioners. So it's something that, it's too late for my kids to pass it on to them, but for long-term meditators, it's something that can be possibly passed on to future generations.
Well, I was sickly as a child, but for 35 years, in 35 years since I started, I've had to take aspirin once. And then I had to go to an eye doctor because I was cutting wood with a chainsaw and splitting with a log splitter, and I got something in my eye, And it says, well, when's your last checkup? I said, 1975. You're getting a full blood work. And I says, oh, it's going to come back normal, and it did.
And it did, yeah. Being a family nurse practitioner and providing primary care, I'd have to say, it's a good idea to still maintain a relationship with your primary care provider, and you just have shown that
it's a good prevention.
Absolutely,
it's good prevention.
Yeah.
So, can you explain what mindfulness actually is?
I was just thinking I didn't start with the definition of mindfulness. So and some people say, why are we hearing so much about it? Why is it such a buzzword? What is mindfulness anyway? So mindfulness, the definition, or one of the definitions, is really just paying attention on purpose in the present moment in a particular way to things as they are. So it's paying attention to this moment right now, right? There's nothing we can do about what's happened. There's nothing we can do with what's going to happen in the future. It's just what is an awareness in this moment. And that can be incredibly freeing, both in a practice, in a meditative practice, and the way we live our lives. So a lot of times I get the question, what's the difference between mindfulness meditation and other forms of meditation? And one of the big differences is that mindfulness is more of a way of living. It's more of a way of being in the world. Right? So it's being fully present. It's not zoning out. It's a misnomer that we could clear. Well, you know this as a practitioner of a meditative practice, right? We can't clear our minds. Have you ever heard the estimate of how many thoughts we have in a day? I don't know.
I know that between the right and left brain hemispheres, the corpus callosum, and there's about 1 billion bits of information that goes from one hemisphere to the other per second. Per second.
That's hard to even conceptualize, right?
Yeah.
And recent estimates are saying that we have somewhere between 40 and 60,000 thoughts a day. I'm thinking, those flowers are pretty. I hope I'm able to get all the information in.
But we're often not aware of the thoughts we're thinking.
Exactly.
Well, and
we can choose what we want to pay attention to, right?
Yeah. So I've heard meditation described as meditation. It's not what you think. It's like the ceasing of the thinking is meditation. And so in the Far East they call it ego death, or no mind in China, or Jesus put it, lose yourself so you'll find yourself later. So you lose yourself, let's say, in helping another person, or work, or gardening, and then you find yourself at peace, or wiser, happier, healthier later. But mindfulness, it's like a full experience, fully experiencing life.
Yes, and choosing what we want to pay attention to, and yes, and then in addition to that definition, sometimes we add kindness or non-judgment, which can be very freeing as well. With
Understanding,
yeah.
Understanding another pain and suffering, and just letting that person be who or she, whoever that person is.
Yes.
So
yeah.
Now, are there different stages to mindfulness? Or anybody tried to? You're either mindfulness or not mindfulness, or there's different degrees of mindfulness.
And that brings me, as you just said, something about so there's 7 attitudinal principles regarding mindfulness. I think John just added a couple more of gratitude or service or something, but one of them is letting go.
Yes.
Letting go, right, of what doesn't serve us. Non-striving, non-judgment is another one. Yes. So not necessarily levels. I don't know. What do you mean? Can you?
Well, like Erik Erikson had 8 stages of development.
Right.
From infancy, birth to to a maturation, fully maturation and golden years, and Freud had different stages. So, I mean, obviously, I would think somebody's been practicing mindfulness for 40 years, like, or 50 years, like Jon Kabat-Zinn, and he's more evolved than somebody who's starting out today. Just because he can get there quicker based on his practice and conditioning.
Right. Yeah. Oh, certainly. I'm sure that's the case. And when I started to talk about those attitudinal principles, one of them also is beginner's mind.
Yeah.
So I would bet that, I mean, I've been a practitioner of meditation for a long time, and there are days when it is easier to sit than others.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for the opportunity to begin again in this moment.
And the days that it's harder to sit are the days you need it the most.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you can come back again and begin again in this moment. So that's what every moment affords us the opportunity to do.
And so what is MBSR?
So MBSR is that program that John developed. And
is it an acronym?
I'm sorry, mindfulness-based stress reduction.
Okay.
And the Pure program is an 8-week program, and there is. Oh, you asked about levels. There's definitely levels of teaching.
Mm-hmm.
There's people that have taken maybe a courses and teach, and again. The purity of the MBSR program, so there's a certification that comes with being a certified MBSR teacher before you can actually say that you're teaching the MBSR program. And it's an 8-week program on purpose. Sometimes people think, and I have to say, single mother of 4, working in the emergency department, when I first started to drive downtown, there were not as many offerings of MBSR in the Chicagoland area, so I took mine downtown at Old St. Pat's, and I would have to get my kids squared away, and I'd be white knuckling on the way to get from the North Shore down to St. Pat's to teach, and I think, what am I doing in the middle of winter, right? Stressing myself out to get to a stress reduction class. But that's how we start taking the 8-week class ourselves. And then there's a certification process. You go through like phase 1 to be a qualified teacher after some like a 7-day teacher training, and then you have to teach a certain amount of classes. And then I just last spring completed the certification. So there's 2 certifying bodies, one at UMass where John started it, and because of the demand for MBSR teachers and those wanting the programs, there's another program at UC San Diego run by Dr. Steve Hickman. And that's where I did my certification.
Okay.
So, that was a long answer to your question.
Yeah. Well, but your personal anecdote is very helpful, and to know that every MBSR teacher has started out as a student.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. And I do every class that I teach. Right now I'm teaching on Thursdays during the day at Botanic Gardens. And every class that comes together becomes a community, and it's really beautiful over those 8 weeks. That's what I started to say, like 8 weeks sometimes feels like a big commitment. But it's 6 weeks to incorporate a habit or a practice, right? And then an extra 2 weeks of support.
Well, and what's nice is that you can see the transformation over time.
Oh, it's so true. When I very first took my very first class, there was a chain-smoking criminal attorney that was just angry and on high blood pressure meds, and by the end of that 8 weeks he had stopped smoking, he was off his hypertension meds, and he was transformed.
Excellent.
Really. So
excellent. All right, so how does MBSR or mindfulness help with health, stress, quality of life?
Yeah, that's kind of what I just said. In terms of, I mean, not just, but that was a good example, right, of how it can help. So, so we react to stress like we did when we were cavemen running from tigers, right, with our amygdala and our stress response. And I don't want to get too far into the science, but as a clinician, I get very excited about the science, because then it really, we can bring the science behind it, and it makes sense. But a practice of mindfulness meditation over time helps us build resilience and better respond rather than react to stress. And so all of the conditions that come along with stress.
Well, I'm fond of saying it's like every day we wash our hair, we brush our teeth and soap and clean the outside of our bodies, but inside we experience sulliness too, and that sulliness is stress and tension. And if you don't practice some type of internal cleansing method, that stress and tension is just going to stay there and cause illness or an injury.
Exactly. And we end up using other things to deal with our stress that are...
Right, to numb the pain, whether it be food or drugs or...
alcohol or cigarettes or whatever.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that you are starting to work with the school system. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I work with one of the things, being the mother of 4 children too, I wish that our kids would listen to us as parents, right, to help. Or
listen to their inner selves.
Yes. Right. Yes. And we are so blessed to live where we live in this area, like on the North Shore, and kids are stressed out more than they have ever been, and they put the stress on themselves so often. And then again, we don't want them to seek out other ways of reducing their stress or helping with their level of unhappiness or those kind of things. So, and one thing that, so I have done the training for mindfulness in the schools curriculum.
And is it just like one day? Do you go there once a week?
I did an online through a Center for Mindfulness curriculum thing for over the course of about 12 weeks. So,
and these are for grade school, high school?
I'm sorry, that's the curriculum that I did.
Oh, okay.
But we're, even if we just get into the schools and just get the kids to learn to take a deep breath in the moment of stress, right? I feel like we're doing, and so one of the things we talk about in taking mindfulness to the schools is how many of we ask the kids how many of you have been told to pay attention, right? And every hand goes up.
Yeah.
And then we ask how many of you have been taught as to what that looks like, paying attention, and no hands go up.
Yeah.
We have not taught them how to pay attention on purpose.
Well, we've got 1 minute.
Oh my goodness! So it did go quickly.
Yes. If you can leave our audience with one tool, what would that be?
Wow, it went so quickly. That just back to just taking that deep breath in the stress of the moment. And
you brought a bell or something? You want to ring it?
Yes, and so let's do that.
Okay.
Yeah. And having experience in the emergency department, I'd love to take it to first responders. I think that's the next place.
And they could actually use it for people that
work with police officers and firefighters.
Yeah, people that have been involved in accidents, etc.
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
So I would just invite everyone to just, even if you leave with nothing else, just to remember to take a deep breath. And John Kabat-Zinn says, he quotes saying, "As long as we are breathing, there is more right with us than wrong." Right? So just stopping in this moment, and may I be safe and protected. May I be peaceful. May I live with kindness and ease.
All right, ring that bell because we got to close. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
You can continue that prayer silently. For more information about Angela Thomas, Infinity Foundation, or Quest Talk Show, stay tuned to the credits at the end. Until next time, wish you good health, good fortune, and good spirits. Thank you.
Thank you.
For more information about this show, our guest, Infinity Foundation, or any of our other programs, please visit our website, infinityfoundation.org, or call us at 847-831-8828.